all for joining us today. We're very, very appreciative, and I hope we can answer whatever questions you have about this terrific new product and about its online component. So today we're going to start with some of the main features of the textbook itself. Conquer Medical Coding by Gene Jurek, Stacy Mose, and Daphne Nearis. So I'm going to share my screen now, and it'll take a couple seconds for that to take effect. So everyone should be able to see me doing my last minute moving around and you should be able to see Chapter 6 now. And I'm using Chapter 6 just because that's the one I pulled. And I will use it for the examples throughout to show the instructor ancillaries, the workbook, the instructor's guide, those kinds of things. So this is an ICD-10 chapter. And one of the things I like to talk about is the organization, not just of the chapters, but also inside the chapter itself. All of the chapters, the ICD, CPT chapters, correspond exactly to the chapters in the actual ICD-10 codebooks and the CPT codebook, so that the student can follow along chapter by chapter. But we take it one step further and show also the organization within the chapter and within sections of the chapter that follow, again, exactly as the code books. So this table shows the organization of the Chapter 6 tab list, and the chapter follows exactly that organization, so that students literally could follow along in the code book as they're reading Conquer Medical Coding. Really makes for a nice transition in learning, actually, for the students. We also provide, as many of the books do, guidelines from the latest government guidelines, in this case for ICD-10. And the book was written really with ICD-10 in mind. We started from the beginning knowing we were going to do ICD-10. And so the approach, as you know, to ICD-10 is rather different than the approach to ICD-9. And the authors took that into consideration in presenting the content, in selecting the type of content to provide. And I think you'll see that reflected in the ICD chapters. We have 3 of these green boxes that occur throughout the book. This happens to be a pharmacology connection box, but we also have an anatomy refresher and a pathophysiology review. I might have the review and the refresher mixed up, but the gist of it is they're refresher information to remind the students of key information that they need, in this particular case pharmacology, to understand more efficiently that chapter's content. I want to call your attention to a case study. This little green box is sort of typical of the cases that are presented throughout the book in all the chapters, save the first one. And as I'm on that topic, let me talk about the first chapter. If you have the book in front of you, Chapter 1 is an overview of the whole coding profession and a little bit about the history of coding and what coders are and what they do and how they fit into the whole healthcare environment. And it's really a nice chapter. And actually, I had a webinar participant say that was a favorite chapter of the book because there isn't anything like it, really. So this is a typical case, as I say there, throughout the book, and the student is presented with the beginnings of information that they need to sort of look for in a doctor's note, an operative note, whatever, and then how to assign those codes. They're throughout the chapter, so you'll see green boxes as I'm scrolling along on the left here. There's another one. We also have these, I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. These, we call them stoplight features. These happen to be 2 yellow lights. Red, we have a red one, we have a green one. And they're, as you might expect, alerts, cautions, and general tips. And we think the stoplight coloration sort of helps the student put some context behind those tips and help them remember them more readily. But this is the biggie. There's a green one right there. This is what we call a pinpoint the code. They are throughout the ICD-10 and the CPT and HCPCS chapters. They are algorithms, decision-making algorithms that show the students in exactly the sequence that they should what to code, how to code, and as you can see, when. Look at the diastolic first. Now, this happens to be a pinpoint to code for heart failure. So the first step is to look at the diastolic and determine acuity. Then the second step, look at the systolic blood pressure and determine acuity. And then you look at them both. And you work your way down to finally you are able to assign the proper code. This is a reasonably complicated one. Some are more complicated. Many of them are less complicated, but it all depends on the disease or the disorder being discussed. What the authors have tried to do is to present decision trees, pinpoint the codes, for the more common diseases and disorders within each chapter. And again, to use them as a stepping off point for discussion, but as a real clear textual and visual representation of how a coding decision is made. And we think this is a major, major feature of the book. It's what all of our reviewers told me when we were having the manuscript and the pages reviewed. This was a very, very important piece of the pie, so to speak. We have checkpoints all the way along, little questions that test student knowledge. The answers will be on Davis Plus and will be available for instructors only. Let me go down a little bit more and get to one of my favorite parts, the chapter summary. I've been doing books for a long time, and these chapter summaries are some of the best I've ever seen. And what I've been telling people is that you could have your students start with the chapter summary. Read this first, then go read the chapter, highlighting what you've read from the summary, and then go back to the summary again and really make that your goals, the understanding within that summary. That's how well written and how comprehensive these chapter summaries are. They really are quite spectacular. Now that's an editor talking, calling a chapter summary spectacular. But really, I think when you read them, you'll agree. You'll agree. Review questions. We've got matching, true, false, the multiple choice, and then internet research. Let the student go out on their own, do some research for sites that have to do with that chapter. Those are the main features of the book. The content itself, we have been told, is written clearly. It flows well. So I think, but I leave that up to you to determine. We think, obviously, it's dead on. The workbook. There's a workbook separate. Work to do. And we consider the workbook a learning tool. And I say that because we had to determine for all of the assessment pieces in the textbook, in the workbook, in Medical Coding Lab, the online program, which pieces we thought would be testing or assessment tools and which would be learning tools. And the authors and I decided that the workbook should be a learning tool. So the answers are in the back of the textbook. So it starts off with a summary, basically, of the chapter. So the student gets, oh, yeah, that's what this chapter is about. A series of codits, which are simple coding exercises, either ICD-10 or CPT. Again, multiple choice. These are all single answer multiple choice, by the way. Some short answer questions. And then at the end, a bunch of case studies again. Cases, cases, cases. We know the coding instructors, you almost can't get enough cases and activities for your students. And so we've tried to give you a large number, a plethora of types of exercises to meet all learning styles. So it's lots of cases in this one. This is a fairly extensive. Here's a smaller one, Myron P. And just asking what the diagnostic tests or coding conventions, asking them to assign the codes. And that's a little bit more at the end. Oh, yeah, just a little tip-off to remember to go use Medical Coding Lab, which we'll talk about shortly. So please do take a look at the workbook as well, and I'd love to hear what you think, good, bad, or indifferent. You can email me at andy@fadavis.com. Let's turn now to the instructional ancillary. Oh, before I stop, Molly, do we have any questions so far on the text of the workbook?
There was more of as a comment about the space available in the workbook, and I was going to have the person that was saying that there wasn't that much room, so I thought she could contact you directly to talk about how much more room they might need for the spaces in the workbook so that students can complete it and turn it in.
Yes, please do. That's always Andy@fadavis.com. That's always a struggle, let me tell you. We try to give enough what's called leading, vertical space, enough lines to fit the content, not necessarily to fit every student's handwriting, because there are page count issues and cost issues and those kinds of things. But please do shoot me an email, and we'll have a chat, because we do this. We will be doing this book and the workbook every year. So right now we're talking about the 2016 edition. Next year we'll be talking about the 2017 edition. So please do let me know. And I'm open to all suggestions, and I always act on anything that I can that makes sense for both the market and the product. So yeah, let's talk about that, because I think it's a little light too, but let's talk. Mm-hmm. Anything else, Molly? That was it, right? Molly, by the way, is our marketing manager for this line and a number of other types of products, and she and I have worked together closely for quite some few years now, I think. Any other questions?
Yes. We don't have anything at this time.
Okay.
I'll keep you updated as we go along. And just a reminder for everyone to use the Q&A box if you do have a question, and we'll get to it as we can. So it helps to just type the question right away when you're thinking of it.
Thanks. All right, the instructor's guide. We offer a fairly traditional instructor's guide that really is designed more to build a curriculum. It has obviously a table of contents. We provide 3 suggested syllabi, one for a 10-week, one for 24, and one for a 32-week course, and show how each chapter fits into that, or might fit into that syllabus. These are also linked to PDF with links to, to that particular chapter in the instructor's guide. I might as well go there now, because we start each chapter, we sequence them the same way. Learning outcomes, an overview of the chapter so that the curriculum person or whoever's setting the course up has an understanding, a fairly clear understanding of the content that's in that chapter without having to go through the book themselves. Our philosophy on building these instructional assets overall is to provide the instructor with as much information and help as we can to make it as easy as possible for them to set up their course and then to teach it. Obviously, we can't teach it for you, but we try to do as much as we can to help you along. A classroom discussion review, these would also be great if you have a hybrid course or a fully online course. They could be discussion board items or group discussions, depending on how you set it up. Resources for the instructor to take a look at some resources that might be out there that they might want to share. Learning activities for that chapter, homework activities. And these right now, I don't have the final workbook, so I've got these XX things in there. But they're there right now. But I have to grab that for the next webinar. Additional instructor resources, we're going to be talking about those, but it lists them in the instructor's guide here. What I'm most excited to show you, though, are what we're calling LessonPros. These LessonPros, there's one for every chapter, at least one. Many of the chapters have 2. Some of the chapters even have 3, depending on the amount of content in that chapter and how long our SMEs think it will take to get through that content. And I'll show you that now. We have a lesson outline, but with an agenda that is timed. So our SMEs have said, if you've got a 45-minute class, and that's pretty much what we base these lesson pros on, here's how long each of these items should take. That can be very helpful in setting up a new course, or to an instructor who is teaching the course for the first time, or even teaching part of the course for the first time. Let them know this is about how long I probably should spend on it. But going back up the top, it starts with the learning outcomes. All the materials you need. Again, the outline. Then the opener outline outcomes. Lecture review. Here's a tutorial on heart failure the instructor might want to check out. Homework. This is all suggested homework, of course. Activities associated with a chapter. And then even what's coming up, so that at the end of the period, the instructor right there in the classroom can say, okay, so the next time we meet, we're going to talk about correct coding for cellulitis. We'll take a look at that. We'll also take a look at ischemic ulcers and venous stasis ulcers. She could tell them what's coming ahead before she'd even maybe looked at the lesson pro for that chapter. Really, I think, a nice feature. Now, the notes. In every lesson pro, in the right-hand margin, we've put notes for the instructor. Remind students to do this. You might want to talk about that. You might want to cover, in this case, use table 6-8 for the categories of hypertension. Remind students about the instructional notes for COPD subcategories. Throughout each lesson plan, there are these notes. It really can help the teacher. Mostly first-time teachers, but experienced faculty will use them as well, as will anyone who's been away from the content for a little bit but needs a little refresher. We really have tried to do everything we can for that instructor, including linking out in this blue box resources, linking out to the Davis Plus resources for that particular chapter. So you can go back and forth from a lesson pro to the instructor resources, on Davis Plus. So let me stop there, and then I'll talk briefly about the PowerPoints and one other document. But are there questions or comments on the instructor's guide or the lesson pros?
We have a more general question than that, but it's a great question. Sure. One of our attendees today says that teaches beginning and advanced coding. Do you see this as a beginning course or more of an intermediate to advanced course?
It's interesting. I actually changed it to more of a basic to an intermediate course, but certainly basic. We aimed to provide in this first book from these authors, and these are fantastic authors, to provide a base for medical coders or medical assistants learning to code in their curriculum. Health information technology students can also use this, although those guys really, they have to have PCS coding as well. This book does not cover PCS. The authors consider it an advanced coding skill. So really this Conquer Medical Coding is more that basic, but it does have some intermediate skills, I think, in there as well. It covers HCPCS. It gives an overview of PCS. I think I probably landed there, basic to intermediate, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Was that the main question?
That was we had one other question that went back to the workbook, asking about
Sure.
the possibility, because they typically assign the workbook as homework, and then asking about if there is a possibility of having the workbook minus the answers. I'd like to interject here because I will be doing the medical coding lab demo very soon, and that's the portion where you'll get to see that you can assign that as homework. So do you have anything to add to that, Andy?
No, I think that's the main thing. Yeah. Again, it comes down to that question of learning versus teaching or assessment, and but I would look at that absolutely. We do have an ebook version coming along. I'm not sure, Molly, when that will be ready. You might have a little more up-to-date information. But there may be a possibility of putting something out digitally that doesn't have the answer key. But really, let's take a look first at Medical Coding Lab because I think and that was our intention, that will really help you with the homework aspect of it.
Right, and then
All right,
it
let's
has
go.
mostly the automated grading, which we'll jump to, but I'll let you get back
Yes.
to what you're showing.
Okay, thanks. Just two more things. PowerPoints. Now, this is the PDF of the PowerPoint, because you all know PowerPoints look like and act like, so I'm not going to bother you with that. But there are a couple things I want to show. One of the things is that the notes. Our SMEs have embedded pertinent notes into, or I should say notes, into the notes section of pertinent slides that provide, again, that helpful information for the instructor teaching the course in the classroom. And she's showing the PowerPoint, and here's what she wants to say. Here are the main points. Many of these notes look like about this length. Occasionally, though, they're even more involved, and this happens to be a slide of a list of diseases and injuries of the eye, and it's a half page there, and a full page, and a full page, and then another half page. So that's got a lot of information. The instructor doesn't need to move. It's all right there. She just prints the PowerPoints out in the notes notes view, and all of that information is readily available to her. We also embed what I call clicker slides. A clicker slide occurs every 5, 6, 7 slides, depending on the content. They allow an assessment immediately of how well the content has gone over with the students. Do they understand what you just covered? It's in today's educational parlance, it's called formative assessment. These are our version, one of them, of formative assessment. They pop up. The teacher can poll the class and however she uses it. Some classrooms have clickers, technology that can be used. I know schools can use cell phones to text a response. Just raise your hand, whatever. The green box you see doesn't appear until the instructor clicks. So you can gauge right away how well the student understands the content. And they also keep the students engaged because they don't know when these are coming up. They're not regular every 4 slides. They vary. We didn't do that on purpose. We varied them per the content. But that's a very nice side effect, so to speak. So we've got the PowerPoints even, not just regular PowerPoints, but they really are embedded with information. One more thing I'll show you for curricular people. We have developed curriculum alignment guides for 3 major accrediting bodies. If you're working at a school that does not use one of these, please do let me know. If you need one of these, we'd be happy to have it done. We have AHEMA, KHEP, and ABHES alignments, and they are basically the content areas. This is happen to be KHEP, so they call them content areas. And then the domain, the competency, basically, and then where the textbook covers it. Now, ABHES is a little bit different. I got to blow this up. And we also have the AHEMA ones. And there are not really very many AHEMA guidelines, but we cover them anyway. So this is something you could hand to a site visitor and say, okay, here's where I'm getting my information to meet that particular competency. We think that could be a valuable asset as well for faculty. Are there questions on any of those before I turn this over to Molly, and we'll take a look at Medical Coding Lab?
So the KHIM guidelines are included. That was just one
I have a
particular.
Yes, KHIM are included, yes.
One person in particular, clearly that's the ones they follow, so we just wanted to clarify and make sure those are the ones.
Absolutely, indeed. And I have a HEMA here. This is a sample from an earlier version, and the final version I looked at and went, oh, no, it's KHIM, not a HEMA. So, yeah, it's KHIM. And this is available on the instructor side of Davis Plus. They're called Curriculum Alignment Guides.
Okay.
All right, let me stop sharing and pass the ball to Molly, who will take you on a trip to through Medical Coding Lab.
So right here, this is actually the login page for Medical Coding Lab. Most of the time when you start to, and this is probably because this is my fault because I was on the login page for so long. So let's actually start at the main page. This is where there we go. So it actually accepted my login. So after you log in to Medical Coding Lab, what we have for you and for students is the dashboard. It's a very nice central point for you to navigate, for your students to navigate, to make it easier. I should make mention about Medical Coding Lab. It is actually included for your students with the text. So when they purchase a new text, they'll get an access code on the inside front cover. So it's a really nice feature. And as we were saying before, this one, the Medical Coding Lab, is really designed as kind of the assessment piece because it does have all these graded activities within here. So this is what the instructor dashboard looks like. But what I'm going to take us to first, so that I can show you the different types of activities and what your students will see, I'm going to jump to this preview student view. And that will open a new tab for us. So when students log into Medical Coding Lab, this is what their dashboard looks like. It's very similar. It's very easy to follow. There's a few less options because they're not creating classes and whatnot. They would just belong to one class. Over here are quick links for students to get to his or her individual grade book, to get to the ebook in its entirety, or to go to the glossary. When we go into the lessons for the students, you'll see that the ebook actually is broken out into each lesson, so the content they need for that lesson is the portion of the ebook that shows up. So that's very nice for them. Makes it a little bit easier than just trying to follow into that huge ebook and keep things bookmarked. They don't really have to. So I'm going to first pop into one of these ICD-10 lessons. And if you might notice, if you happen to have the text with you, or if you're reviewing the text at the same time, all the lessons, they actually pair up to the chapters in the book. So the content is really created to go with the book and be that assessment piece. As I was mentioning, here is this e-chapter that goes with this chapter, so they don't have to be searching for it. They have flashcards. It's very nice. One of the nice things about this, too, is the design is such that a student can use this on a tablet or a smartphone. So when you have things like these flashcards, they can be anywhere and just be studying the flashcards. So it's a nice feature to be able to have this kind of design that allows different devices to be used. So I'm going to actually jump over to the don't tip the scale is something like your hangman type of exercises. I will pop into this short answer just because I would like to mention something about it. So the short answer is the only type of activity in here that is not automatically graded by our grade book. And there is an option within the Medical Coding Lab for you to create small groups so that when students complete this kind of short answer, if you created the small groups within the discussion forum, it posts their answers to their small group, and then the students are able to see each other's answers within that discussion forum, their small group discussion forum, and make comments and work together and give a little more collaborative environment in something that is an online learning environment. So let's do another quick jump. So since we're in the ICD-10, I want to jump over here to the build medical codes. When we're in the CPT chapters, it's different. They're called analyze medical codes. Really the intention being that we're not going to just have activities. We're going to have activities that are the content dictates what those activities should be and how effective they should be in supporting learning. So here for the build medical code, we had that little scenario in the back, so sorry, and when you scroll across this question mark, I can still see what that little bit of scenario was that I kind of went back past kind of quickly. But now when they're answering these, they're just going to drag and drop for their answers. And, of course, I'm going through it very quickly. And when they get a feedback screen, it shows them exactly which parts of that building the code that they got correct and which ones they got wrong, and then, of course, what the correct answer is. And I was doing it so quickly, I only got 1/2 of one correct.
Not bad.
So, when you're doing it blindly like that, not bad at all for guessing. The other thing I just want to show here is that for every single lesson, we have case studies. Andy was showing you the case scenarios in the book, but there were several within the workbook. We really know that these are the kind of scenarios that are going to help students become used to what they're going to face professionally. These are, akin to very real scenarios that they will have to be looking at and understand the documentation. So we have case studies for every single lesson in Medical Coding Lab. This is one example. And, of course, these case studies apply very specifically to this chapter and this lesson, so that, lessons 15 through 17, this part of the ICD-10 manual. So no surprises here. These case scenarios are going to reference very specifically what is in that portion, that chapter. So, again, they'll read the scenario, be able to just answer their questions based on what they just reviewed, and a similar type of feedback screen which tells them which are the correct answers. Now let me go back to the main screen. So I'm taking us back to the main screen so that I can now actually take us down to one of these CPT chapters so that we can take a look at these, analyze the codes. You'll notice, though, that this lesson is set up exactly the same as that other ICD-10 lesson was. So it's really easy for students to know exactly, where they are in each lesson. We have these progress bars. You can see some of them are filled for things that have been done in the past. But, again, everything's intended to let students have a nice visual, know where they need to go, what they need to do next. But let's take a look at these, analyze the codes. So here it is much more about, it's a question, it's applying to CPT, and then it's a check all that apply. So it's a little bit more of a difficult thing that they have to do than just if it was a single multiple choice answer. Oh, there's a lot in here. And that's
because, as you know, when you do a CPT code, you're looking at what pieces of information in a doctor's note are important and which ones are not. And so that's why it's a multiple select, because that case will have, may mention a graft, but that doesn't mean it's pertinent for that particular code. Thanks, Molly. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and then you get a similar feedback screen. You can see all the ones that I had missed there. Of course.
Well.
So we'll hop back. So then the last we were talking about the case studies and how important those are. So the last thing I want to show for activity types are what we call our capstone case studies, and I apologize, I have to scroll all the way to the bottom. So after our very last lesson, there are these capstone cases. And these, unlike the other case studies, so I was pointing out with those other case studies that the case scenarios are very much, they apply to what was learned in that lesson and that chapter, and it's very, applying very specific knowledge. These capstone case studies is really what it is, the capstone. They have to have their complete curriculum knowledge, have gone through all of their learning to be able to synthesize everything and bring it to these capstone case studies, because it might give you, it's going to be a similar way that they encounter in the professional work world that, okay, I might know that it is a cardiovascular case, but there are complications or other things that go on that it's not so neat and tidy, and that's what the intention of these capstone cases are. So you can see it's a little bit more lengthy. The questions are still multiple choice, but as you go through them, you can see that it's asking for CPT, it's asking about modifiers, and the ICD-10 code. So it really is bringing all of that together. So the difference on the feedback screen for these is that you do get the rationale. Since they are more complex cases, that's really helpful to have the rationale included. And I know we've also talked about with several groups about how this might be a nice enhancement to a final exam, being able to assign the capstone case studies as a part of the final assessment. So with that said, that was so I could walk you through all the activities that were on the student side. So I'm going to close out of the student side, which is going to bring us back to, this is the instructor dashboard where we started. One of the things that I always think is really great to see is how quickly you can create a class in the medical coding lab. So you just have a class title. The description is optional. You have a start and end date. And then one of the things here is the class ID is listed here. This is how your students actually get attached to the class that you create. So you do provide them the class ID so that they're able to enter it into their medical coding lab and get attached to your class. You have some options with that where you could auto-enroll students. But once you hit the save and continue, that is it. Your class has been created. If you wanted to just use the default settings and make it more of a practice type of thing, what it would do is it would set the due date for everything as the last day that you put in for that when you set up the class, and it would include all content. But otherwise, we can also go in and we can customize the settings, and there's a lot of different options that you have here. And I do want to note, I know I'm going through this really fast because I want to show you more about the program, but when you adopt, we do have webinar classes to get you started. We have a whole instructor guide to really help get you comfortable and get you going with Medical Coding Lab. So the very first thing you can do with customizing, you can change the order of the chapters. You can also even say, you know, I actually don't want to include HCPCS, and maybe there's this part of CPT I don't actually do. So you can actually take those out. And over here, this is a nice little thing that lets you know kind of what the original order is and, you know, what courses or what lessons are available to you. If you roll it over there, you can still see it on this right-hand side. But then you can save however you want the lessons to appear. I know I talked to one instructor who teaches the ICD-10 in a separate class from a CPT and really liked this feature because she could show just the ICD-10 chapters and then in the next section be able to show just the CPT chapters and activities and lessons. So once you're in the specific lesson, you can then customize each lesson. And as you saw there, I was picking which lesson from the drop-down menu. If you want to set an assignment due date for all the activities in the lesson, then you can just set it here, and then that's going to set your due date. Flashcards is not right. That'll set your due date down here for the activities. And so that's a universal or global for that lesson. You can set the due dates. This is what a lot of people are going to end up doing, is coming in and setting due dates for each lesson. We have some different grading rules where you can allow students to practice before they submit for grading, or you can grade on the first attempt and make it really like a very strict assessment tool. And this is what I was talking about, where you have the option to make those short answer exercises group assignments and set them as group assignments. But as I was down here, one of the things I wanted to show is that, yes, this populated with that universal date, but if I wanted to say, you know, the short answer, I want to give people a little less time because I'm going to have them do the group assignments, so I want to give more time for students to respond to each other, and then I can change the be pretty granular and change individual dates down below. And then I can save this and that's been saved, and that can go on to your next lesson. So if you have, I'm going to return to our dashboard because I want to show something. If you have spent some time setting some lesson settings, we do have a nice option in here that allows you to clone the class, especially if you have different sections. You teach it from semester to semester. With the clone class, it's going to save you some time. It's definitely going to save you the most amount of time if you have sections in one semester that have the same due dates. Of course, in semesters, you'll have to just go in there and change. For some people that really spend a lot of time to really want to get the class to what they want it, that is a really nice feature. So Medical Coding Lab is live now. We have everything as a regular lab or regular site, but we are not yet up and running with what we would call demo classes. So I'm going to switch over to another one of our products so that I can show you what a populated gradebook looks like. It is one of the nice things is that the gradebook across our products is the same, so I can actually show this to you, no problem. This is our medical language lab, and as I said, I just want to be able to show a gradebook example. And while we're sitting here waiting for this, Andy, are there any questions we can at least go into that?
We have a few. So the first one is it LMS compatible, Canvas specifically? And the answer is yes. All of the grades can be exported very easily and then imported into a Blackboard, if that's what you're using, or Canvas, or Moodle, or SCORM. So it's really quite compatible with all the main ones. Another question, is the interactive coding, which I think she means medical coding lab, a supplement or required? So I'm not quite sure what that question means, but the medical coding lab comes free with the book, and we certainly encourage people to use it, but if you don't want it, you don't have to. And then another one, Molly asked, are you allowed to change the point values per question?
We aren't really able to do the weighted stuff yet, but I will show you where you have freedom in the gradebook to change grades according to what you want. But I think that question's asking about changing different point values for different activities, and we don't yet have that, but we've had that come up before. So it's something we're examining of, like, feasibility of being able to do it and how we can do it. And I definitely, in the same way that Andy was saying, share your feedback, it's true. Especially with the medical coding lab, we have the ability, with technology to take the feedback from our customers and really be able to, we've made a lot of changes with some of our older products, like the one that I'm showing an example of, the gradebook, because of wonderful customer feedback that we've gotten, and we've just really been able to enhance and improve the products on a kind of a continual basis. So we definitely encourage you to share what your needs are as we go through this. So as I said, this is the Medical Language Lab, Medical Coding Lab's gradebook. Will look very similar with the different color scheme and say Medical Coding Lab, excuse me. I will point out, from this gradebook view, this is where that export gradebook that Andy was talking about. When you click on the question mark here, it brings up support material that shows you how to do the export gradebook. These are the different LMS that are supported, and you also can do an export of these individual assignment scores rather than showing out of the percentage, which will make more sense when I go into the actual gradebook. So down here we have some sample students. They have really interesting names since they're demo students. But this is what your gradebook would look like. This is the highest level, kind of gives you a quick snapshot. One of the things that people really like is this time spent column. So right now I'm at the highest level. I'm going to see how much time these students have spent total in the program. But as I drill down, I can now see how much time was spent on each. Now this is for that one student that I drilled down to. Now I can see how much time this student has spent on each one of the lessons. And then it makes sense because, this one's not started. They've only spent 6 minutes here and they haven't finished it. But as we go down, and we can drill down even more, so I went into that particular lesson. This is where I was talking about that you can adjust final scores. So maybe, I worked with this student and, we looked at that activity, let them retake it. I can actually change it if I wanted to, and then you can go in here and save final scores. So there's that. But that was what I was talking about, too, that the final scores that it shows you, as you can see, is out of 100. So it's 100, it's a percentage. So that was what I was meaning about the, you have an option within the export gradebook stuff that's for the learning management system to also export the specific kind of lesson score. And it would be, if there was the 4 critical listening activities, 4, or 2 out of 4, or 3 out of 4, however, which was a terrible example, didn't match up. so yes, and then actually let me go back to, so if I go back to the main gradebook view, one of the other things that you might have noticed was this compare button. So I can compare individual students against the class. And it's, using this tool is just to provide a quick visual. Of course, this doesn't want to, being slow. Let me see if another one is faster.
Well, your computer's slow today.
It is slow today. Ooh, let me try this one. All right, so this is actually the one that we have in place that would be compare with all classes. So it's really comparing. It doesn't want to load. we do have some really cool visual tools. Mm-hmm.
While we have that loading, let me throw another question at you. One says, does the medical coding lab integrate into Moodle, or is there just a link through the LMS? Want to take that one?
Okay, so yeah, it's not integrated. It's correct. So the students would end up having to go to the medical coding lab as a separate site. I think that's what that's asking, because I know some systems allow for the full integration within the LMS. So the way it is now, we do not have that full integration. So that's,
And then another faculty who I know well, actually, it says, is there a list of assignments from Coding Lab with point values assigned so as to create a syllabus using Coding Lab for points? No, but I love that idea, Darcy, and I will take that to heart and put something together. I don't think it'll be difficult, but I'll double check with with the editors here. But I think that's a great idea. I know exactly what you mean. So thanks for that question.
I was going to go see if one of my other demo classes would let me do this better. There we go.
There we go.
So when you click, and let me see, I did that kind of fast. So if you click on a student record for that compare, now I'm comparing this particular student to the overall lesson averages in the class, a quick visual. This student's doing pretty well. I wonder if my compare with all classes will. This might be a little slow, but you can also do what you're doing. It synthesizes all of our data from the program. So it will do the same with Medical Coding Lab, and you'll have an ability to compare your class. So I'm comparing this demo class and how the students are performing to all the classes that have been created and in our medical language lab, but in your case, it'd be Medical Coding Lab. So it's, again, just a nice visual. You could say, oh, my class is doing better than average. That's great news. But that shows you the grade book. As I said, in Medical Coding Lab, it'll just be a little bit different color scheme. But I'll pop back over to Medical Coding Lab. That was the very quick overview. As I mentioned with Medical Coding Lab, when you do adopt, and if you are really interested in integrating that into the classroom with your materials, we have resources to ensure that you have the help that you need. So do we have any other questions?
There have been none come in. No, well, hold on.
Okay.
Oh, what type of test bank is included with the text? My apologies. It's ExamView Pro, and that's not quite available yet either. That is still being, some of it's still being copy edited, and the rest of it is being loaded into ExamView Pro and tested, but that should be available middle of next month. So it's an ExamView Pro.
Okay.
And otherwise, someone said thank you. Well, someone, I know who it is, said thank you. You're welcome.
I did stop sharing the Medical Coding Lab because I wanted to have this one last slide so people can know where we go from here. So if you're interested in adopting Conquer Medical Coding, this whole package, or if you're just interested in still learning more, we have a few things to keep us in the conversation and keep things moving along. We do have a survey at the end of the webinar, so encourage you to answer. It's a very quick survey. Answer that because that lets us know where you are as far as what your interest level is and how we can continue to assist you and provide you the information that you need. And if you are interested in a more in-depth demo, a more personalized demo for any of the pieces that you've seen today, you can contact demo@fadavis.com and request that. You can get the preview access and be able to go to Medical Coding Lab and explore that on your own. You definitely are not going to break it. It's a very user-friendly site that you can delete courses very easily if you just want to create something and play with it. And then, of course, there's always the option of contacting your educational consultant or our customer service, or, as Andy was saying, he gave you his information earlier. But, yes, you can continue the conversation with us, and we are happy to answer your questions and excited about the offering that we have here and to get people into it more. So, Andy, do you have anything else to add?
No, there was one last question. Any billing and insurance components? And the answer is no. This is a straight coding product right now, so there's no billing or reimbursement information. Is there another text to go along with? I hope so. Is the answer to that for billing and reimbursement. And someone else that looks like a great learning tool. Can't wait to try the demo. Thank you. So let's move them to the webinar. Thank you all very, very much for your patience. I appreciate it. And again, follow-up is whenever you need Andy at F.A. Davis or any of the emails you see on your screen now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a great afternoon.